The time is mine. I'm reclaiming it. Please ask the witness to stop talking.
You asked me a question.
Reclaiming.
Allow me to answer my question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like about 10 seconds back.
The time belongs. You are slandering me incorrectly. You're saying it's dishonest.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America. Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of This Week in DUMBmocracy, the show that showcases political buffoonery as it happens. So today we're going back to the House Weaponization of the Federal Government Committee, the select committee run by Jim Jordan, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s testimony before that committee. We're going to be specifically looking at the question and answer session between Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz from Florida and RFK Jr., and we're going to be fact-checking the assertions made by Debbie Wasserman-Schultz and the accusations made by her against RFK Jr. But before we get into that, be sure to like, share, subscribe to the channel, share the show with your friends. Let's get into the video right now. This is a very interesting exchange. There's a lot of accusations made, and I'm going to do my best to fact-check a lot of what was asserted here.
We'll get it. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we respectfully requested that you rescind Mr. Kennedy's invitation to appear here due to his repeated and very recent statements that spread dangerous anti-Semitic and anti-Asian conspiracy theories and attempted to move into executive session because House rules prohibit public testimony that degrades or defames people. His reckless rhetoric helped fuel anti-Semitic incidents, which for the record are at the highest level in the United States since 1970. They have nearly tripled in the last 6 years. Since you gave Mr. Kennedy a megaphone today, I want to give him a chance to correct his statements and prepare some of the harm that he's helped cause.
So you see what she's setting up here? By the way, before this, when the session first opened, when the committee hearing first opened, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz brought a motion to shut down the hearing, essentially, and to go into executive session because of these accusations she's made against RFK Jr. That motion was tabled by the committee in a vote. It's kind of ironic to see Democrats trying to silence a hearing about censorship by the government.
Mr. Kennedy, you're well educated. So yes or no, please. Are you aware that for centuries Jews have been scapegoated and blamed for causing illnesses like Black Plague and more recently COVID?
I am. Those are known as blood libel, and they are one of the worst and most disturbing parts of human history.
Good. I'm glad to know that, of course, that you acknowledge that. Of course, it's true and well documented that this pernicious form of anti-Semitism led to centuries of discrimination, even horrific pogroms and massacres, and it still fuels deadly violence today. Yet last week, you floated a baseless conspiracy theory that the coronavirus was bioengineered to target Caucasians and Black people, but to spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people. Mr. Kennedy, your bizarre, unproven claim echoes that same historic slander of labeling Jews and Chinese people as a race, and that Jews, and in this case Chinese people, somehow managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You do see that, yes or no?
You're misstating.
No. I quoted what you said earlier, and it is directly what you said. So just ask me yes or no.
I was describing an NIH-funded study.
No, you didn't cite any.
I was describing an NIH-funded study by Cleveland Clinic scientists.
Reclaiming my time. You did not reference reclaiming
published in USC Medical, which is one.
The time is mine. I'm reclaiming it. Please ask the witness to stop talking.
You asked me a question. Allow me to answer my question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like about 10 seconds back.
The time belongs.
You are slandering me incorrectly. You're saying it's dishonest.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Florida.
And myself.
Mr.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Florida.
I'd like 15 seconds back.
We will be happy to give you that.
Thank you so much. You did not cite any study like you are citing here now during that conversation. You referenced no study at all. You simply labeled Jews and Chinese people as a race, and you also said that somehow they managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You don't see that? You're trying to rewrite history here.
So let's pause here. We have a disagreement between RFK Jr. and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz over what he said. By the way, the statements that she's referencing is from that whole dinner in New York City where the two gentlemen got into it and there was a statement about him farting and stuff. We did a video on that as well. You can click the link above to see that video. But let's go and see who's right here. Was RFK Jr. referencing a study? Or is he being as racist as Debbie Wasserman-Schultz is saying? Let's go to the videotape. Here are the comments in context that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz is referencing, and let's judge what's really going on here.
And we need to talk about bioweapons. The level, I know a lot now about bioweapons because I've been doing a book on it for the past 2.5 years, and you know, the technology that we now have to develop these microbes, we've put hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are because of the structure of the genetic structure, genetic differentials among different races of the receptors of the ACE2 receptor. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. But we don't know whether it was deliberately targeted that or not. But there are papers out there that show the racial and ethnic differential impact to that. We do know that the Chinese are spending hundreds of millions of dollars developing ethnic bioweapons, and we are developing ethnic bioweapons. That's what.
Okay, so there you get the gist of what he's saying. Now I heard two different things in there. There was a reference to a paper, and there was a reference to ACE2 receptors. So how about this? Let's do a search for a study written recently about COVID-19 referencing ethnicity, and it'll be the ethnicities that were referenced by Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, and ACE2 receptors, and let's see what we come up with. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So I did a search for those search parameters and came up with this study called New Insights into Genetic Susceptibility of COVID-19 and ACE2 and TMPRSS2 Polymorphism Analysis. Now, I am not a doctor, and I don't know what any of this means, but I am able to read abstracts of clinical papers like this. I've done it before, and pretty much anyone is able to do that. So let's look at what this says and what exactly it means to everyone here. So the background of the story is COVID-19 caused by the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2 has now been confirmed worldwide. Yet COVID-19 is strangely and tragically selective. Morbidity and mortality due to COVID-19 rise dramatically with age and coexisting health conditions, including cancer and cardiovascular diseases. You can also factor in diabetes, obesity, basically me. Everything that you would think about in a larger, older person like me. I'm not that old, I'm 45, but you get the point, right? Human genetic factors may contribute to the extremely high transmittability of SARS-CoV-2 and to the relentlessly progressive disease observed in a small but significant portion of infected individuals, but these factors are largely unknown. Now, I'll leave it to you to look at this study. I'm going to put the link in the description below so you can look at it for yourself. And by the way, YouTube, don't get mad at me. This is an actual study from bmcmedicine.biomedcentral.com. It seems to be a peer-reviewed study. Now, I'm going to head down to the conclusions of this report right here in the abstract. The study suggested that ACE2 and TMPRSS2 DNA polymorphisms were likely associated with genetic susceptibility of COVID-19, which calls for a human genetics initiative for fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. So what does that mean? It means that the study found that there are certain groups with certain genetic markers that are more susceptible to COVID-19 and some who are less likely to transmit COVID-19. So when RFK Jr. is talking about a study and this sort of genetic markering and what it was found, he's got a point. Now, I also did a search for the Ashkenazi Jews that were mentioned in this report. There is some reference to Ashkenazi Jewish people saying that they do not appear to carry, I'm going to highlight it for you here, Ashkenazi Jewish populations do not appear to carry such variants in ACE2 coding regions, referring to figure 1b, which is the figure above here. Now, again, I can't read this whole thing. This is a bunch of gobbledygook to me, but here's the ACE2 study, and ASJ, as you'll see where I'm pointing, it's sort of on the bottom right, third from the bottom, is a trait that was looked at in the context of this study. So when we talk about these variants and what's going on with COVID-19, RFK Jr. was talking about a study like this, or maybe even this study, and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz is simply ignoring that. So let's now get back to the rest of the hearing and see what else Debbie Wasserman-Schultz has to offer here, and if it's just as buffoonish as what we've seen so far.
Mr. Kennedy, you compared COVID public health policies to barbaric, murderous tactics of Nazi Germany, saying that Jewish people in Nazi Germany had more freedom than Americans facing COVID health restrictions. In hindsight, Mr. Kennedy, do you reject this absurd and deeply hurtful and harmful comparison, or do you still stand by it?
Congressman, what you are saying is a lie.
That you said it.
I did not. I never
Okay.
I never, ever
Mr. Chairman, I'm
compared
happy to
COVID
answer into the record when Mr.
countermeasures.
Kennedy said that. I reclaim my time. In discussing COVID public health measures, you made light of the genocide against Jewish people by saying, and I quote, "Even Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps to Switzerland, you could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did." Mr. Kennedy, do you think it was easy for Jewish people to escape systematic slaughter of Nazis, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. Mr. Kennedy, do you think it was just as hard to wear a mask during COVID as it was to hide under floorboards or false walls so you weren't murdered or dragged to a concentration camp? Yes or no?
Excuse me?
That's a question, yes or no?
I didn't hear your question.
Okay. I said, do you think it was just as hard to wear a mask during COVID as it was to hide under floorboards or false walls so you weren't murdered or dragged to a concentration camp?
Of course not. That's
Okay.
ridiculous.
But that's a comparison that you made.
I did
Mr.
not
Kennedy,
make that comparison.
Were the measures taken to contain the spread and fatalities related to COVID in any way at all comparable to the murder of 6 million Jews, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Let's be very clear here. There's no legitimate comparison to the Holocaust. It doesn't matter if you're talking about AI, vaccine mandates, or anything else. There is no comparison. And if this were a slip of the tongue, Mr. Kennedy, or a one-off comment, we would all move on. But
And we're going to move on because I'm not going to give Debbie Wasserman-Schultz the platform to go into what her opinion is. Frankly, her opinion doesn't matter to me. She's not really a serious person, in my opinion. But let's examine whether or not RFK Jr. said this. This is obviously Godwin's law, folks, right? The idea that all political discussions eventually turn into a comparison to Germany and the bad people from World War II. I'm trying to be a little more careful in my language because thanks to you guys, we have so many new subscribers, and YouTube has finally welcomed us into their partner program. So be a little more careful than normal. I'm going to try to be from now on. But we're still going to fact check whether RFK Jr. made the comments that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz claims that he made, and we're going to see the context in which he made these comments to see if he's just being anti-Semitic, is he being over hyperbolic, and if he is being over hyperbolic, easy for me to say, then maybe we can explain the utility of sort of being that over hyperbolic. Let's see what the video says. Let's go to the videotape. So I managed to find the video that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz was referencing about RFK Jr.'s remarks about COVID restrictions and comparing them to the bad people from WW2. Let's take a look at what RFK Jr. says here.
Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. I visited in 1962 East Germany with my father and met people who had climbed the wall and escaped. So it was possible. Many died doing it, but it was possible. Today, the mechanisms are being put in place that will make it so none of us can run and none of us can hide. Within 5 years, we're going to see 415,000 low-orbit satellites. Bill Gates says his 65,000 satellites alone will be able to look at every square inch of the planet 24 hours a day. They're putting in 5G to harvest our data and control our behavior. Digital currency that will allow them to punish us from a distance and cut off our food supply. Vaccine passports.
Okay, so we get the context now of what he was saying. Did he say what Debbie Wasserman-Schultz said that he said? Yes, RFK Jr. said the quote that she referenced at the hearing. What does that mean? Well, we discussed Godwin's law a little bit. Everything devolves into a discussion of the bad people from WW2 and their leader. It happens all the time in politics. We've seen comparisons between Donald Trump and that person all the time. There is a utility to these comparisons when made by people who aren't buffoons. What is that utility? A comparison between Trump and that bad person, or between COVID restrictions and the people from that bad country, is not meant to be a one-to-one comparison when done intelligently. Both are meant to be examples of past record of democratic republics failing. They're meant to be, in this case at least, from what I'm seeing from RFK Jr., a warning about the rise of possible tyrannical, totalitarian rule that will destroy a republic, and is meant to be a reminder of past failures to preserve the present republic. Now, you could say that all references to the bad people from WW2 and their leader are buffoonish because the one-to-one comparison of it all is never, ever apt. And Debbie Wasserman-Schultz actually did a serviceable job of showing that. And indeed, RFK Jr. said there is no one-to-one comparison between COVID restrictions and what was going on in Germany in the 40s. There is no comparison at all. There's certainly no comparison between what Donald Trump was doing during his presidency and what was going on in Germany during the 40s. Absolutely no comparison one-to-one. But there is a use for hyperbole in educating people about failures of the past. And while this is always an extreme example, you can understand why someone would make it. Now, this is also a sign, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, of the low historical knowledge in America to begin with, because everything degrades down, as per Godwin's law, to a discussion of those bad people from WW2 shows that A, we love to go to extremes when we talk about political discourse, and B, we have a very, very low threshold of knowledge to use and to utilize in our discussions of political topics of the day. So we always go back to what's safe, what most people know, and that's these horrible people. So that's going to do it for this video. What do you think, guys? Who was the real buffoon here? Was it RFK Jr.? Was it Debbie Wasserman-Schultz? Was it both? I tend to think that there was some buffoonery on both sides of this. There's certainly a jump to hyperbole. There's a jump to exaggeration by both in different contexts. Is one more useful than the other? Let me know what you think in the comments. And of course, as always, like, share, subscribe to the channel. Get your friends involved. Let's start a discussion about these political buffoons that we seem to run into every single day, and keep the conversation going about what's going on this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.